The Bloomington City Council recently rejected an ordinance making it easier for the city to remove items blocking sidewalks, streets, and roads. Lucas Gonzalez reports it's been widely seen as an effort to prevent homeless individuals from camping in public spaces.
The streets of Bloomington are often teeming with pedestrians, especially when classes are in session and students flock downtown. But the city says those spaces aren't always accessible, as sometimes stray items prevent people from using them as intended. That's why the city tried to enact legislation, making it easier to forcibly remove items blocking the public right-of-way. City Attorney Mike Rooker says the measure was prompted by an instance this year in which a person refused to remove their belongings from the right-of-way.
Staff reached out to law enforcement for help. However, law enforcement indicated that they could not address right-of-way obstructions absent a more specific ordinance defining when the right-of-way would be considered blocked.
The measure came before the City Council last week, but was rejected by most members. Had it passed, Rooker says it would have defined in the city code what constitutes an obstruction. That would allow the city to remove obstructions more easily. The ordinance makes no mention of homeless individuals, but the council members and residents alike see it as a response to homeless encampments in public spaces. Rooker says people generally remove their belongings when asked, but in the case earlier this year, the city considered getting a court order since its code does not define a right-of-way obstruction.
So the idea here is we have to have a mechanism in our code in that circumstance, which is admittedly rare, but nonetheless very possible and is something we have experienced.
Some criticize the city for a perceived lack of consistency when it comes to obstructions, like scooters, which continue to block sidewalks despite multiple measures intended to regulate them. Even though Rooker framed the ordinance as a solution to accessibility issues, Councilmember Isabel Piedmont Smith challenged that notion, describing it as an attempt to further criminalize homelessness.
This is about having the legal and law enforcement tools to use against people who are unhoused, who don't have any other place to keep their belongings except with them.
Roughly a dozen members of the public spoke at the meeting. Most spoke against the ordinance, saying it targets homeless individuals without offering them any solutions. Nick Angelos was one of 4 representatives of the mutual aid organization Help Ourselves who spoke. He says the city should consider sanctioned spaces for homeless individuals to stay at.
We have plenty of vacant lots in town. We have plenty of resources to make this happen. I just don't think we've seen the will in the government so far.
But Councilmember Sue Scamboluri says the city's already investing in long-term solutions to homelessness.
I don't accept the assertion that the city is heartless and simply not doing anything productive in that regard. I think the tension exists because at the same time we are advocating for a long-term solution-based approach, we also have real-time challenges to deal with.
The ordinance came before the council after the Board of Public Works approved a non-binding resolution of the same nature in mid-August. That passed the same week the Parks Board approved a ban on tents and other enclosed structures in Bloomington parks during the daytime. Camping at parks overnight was banned in early 2021. Had the ordinance passed, the city says an individual who fails to remove an obstruction when asked to would be considered trespassing. That also concerned some council members. Rooker says the city would only pursue punitive options as a last resort, however. For Indiana News Desk, I'm Lucas Gonzalez.
The initiative raised questions about whether the city acted lawfully when enforcing bans on camping at public parks. The city's legal department says a court order is not required to remove tents or other items from parks or public rights of way.